beyond the Twilight Zone, past the outer limits of reality. You're listening to the Unicus Radio Hour with your host, Robert Stanley.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Unicus Radio Hour. I'm your host, Robert Stanley. It is indeed a great pleasure to be with you again. It is terrific Tuesday, that it would be August 13th. Our special guest tonight is James Horak. He's coming back to the show again, and I'm very fortunate to have him as a guest. And I think we're all going to learn something tonight. James, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay, so, I had to do a little show prep, like any good host, in order to hopefully be able to have an intelligent conversation with you about what you've been researching lately. And it is truly mind-boggling. Everything else put aside now. This is really serious, what you're talking about, because it affects everyone, if I understood you correctly, about the timeline, how it had been interrupted.
Yes.
Intentionally. Now, it also hit me really personally when you were talking about Napoleon, where he was when it happened, because I did go there when I was 15. I spent time alone in the second chamber. Some people call it the Queen's Chamber. And then I went up the Grand Gallery into the upper chamber, the King's Chamber, so-called, and I walked in there just as the tour guide was striking that stone box. And it was the weirdest thing, James, because I never had experience quite like that before. As the sound started to resonate and amplify back on itself, my vision went white. I mean, there was this crazy, crazy loud hissing sound on top of the volume or the frequency of that tuning fork, and then I was suddenly out of the pyramid. I was standing outside the pyramid, or so it felt, that I was outside the pyramid looking back and wondering how I got outside. I wasn't there very long. I got the sensation there was someone else with me. I didn't know who it was. Oh, not one person. Like I said, I was in a group of people. I didn't think everybody came out. It was weird. I knew I wasn't alone when I was out of the building, but then as the sound started to diminish, I was back. And everything started to kind of come back into focus. And I'm looking around and thinking, what in the heck was that all about? Because I wasn't expecting it. And even if I was, I don't think anybody could have told me, okay, hang on to your hat. Here, you're going to go for a little ride. Seriously, there's no way. I don't think the English language could explain, buckle up for that little adventure. So I've often wondered, because I've studied that room with the box, and it turns out, something I just came across tonight is, there was one of those boxes allegedly in the Queen's Chamber as well, and it's gone missing.
Yes.
You agree with that? Okay.
Oh, there are so many things about the structures, not just the Great Pyramid, but the Sphinx.
Yes.
That have been found and hidden the same way that Tutankhamun's tomb, when it was found, it was sealed. It would have had a history of his entire lineage, not just his dynasty, but everyone that was related to him up to his assuming the throne as a boy king.
Right.
The most important aspect of that is who was his father. One of the most carefully guarded secrets, one that only a 33rd degree Mason and above knows, is the significance of Akhenaten, whom they worship.
Okay. Well, I know he worshipped the sun, allegedly. He was a monotheist at a time when that was very unpopular.
Akhenaten was, yes.
Akhenaten?
Yes.
Yeah.
He founded a city dedicated to the worship of Amun.
Right.
And his son probably would have followed in his footsteps once he discovered that the priest caste that had put him on the throne had lied to him about the period of his father.
Yes.
And what his father was doing. His father believed in nationalism.
Okay.
And at that day and time, and right on up to the 15th century, nationalism meant a devotion to one God, or monotheism.
Yeah.
It strengthens the nation.
Sure.
So just the same way that Mohammed strengthens the nations of the Middle East.
Right. So now Napoleon, I was reading, much to my surprise, was actually born Italian.
Mm-hmm.
And became quite the military leader. And, God, he was ruthless.
Well, one has to put Napoleon in perspective.
Okay.
Napoleon inspired his men.
Yeah.
And he inspired on the field.
Yeah.
He would ride up and down his cannoneers, his infantry, and his cavalry. right out in front of snipers, and he wore the French hat designating high rank, and it would be filled with holes before he was done.
Man.
This was commonplace. He also, when he took a country, like even those that were protectors of the faith, the first thing that he did was throw out the Inquisition.
Yeah.
Now, if you call that ruthless, so be it. But that was a fine thing to do.
Well, specifically in Egypt, I'm talking about what he did there by coming in and killing so many people. And then when the British caught up with him and sank his fleet, he was actually killing his own men because he didn't want to have to deal with them. And he killed all the prisoners. And specifically in August, it was really a weird month. We don't have an exact date, or at least I haven't been able to find one, for when he actually entered the pyramid and had that experience. But it was shortly after that he got out of there.
Well, his adventure in the Great Pyramid overnight changed him.
Clearly.
And a lot of what you're reading is English propaganda.
You mean British?
Yes.
Right. So this account on his deathbed, he said, what difference would it make? You wouldn't understand it if I told you?
No.
Okay.
No, they wouldn't understand it.
Well, yeah.
There are many people today that wouldn't understand it.
I can tell from what little I've heard of your other interviews about this. Yeah, it is. It's a little difficult. I know I've seen a movie about this specifically, and I can't remember the name of it right now. It's somewhere in my stack of DVDs. Someone gave me this movie about some kids that found like a toy bear. It came to them through some sort of weird geometric energy portal. Turns out the bear had a microchip in it from Intel, and its whole thing was it had come from the future. It was supposed to get a teardrop from the past before all our DNA had become corrupt. So it was us trying to save ourselves from the future by reaching to the past. It was really bizarre.
Well, it's only bizarre because it's something that's very difficult for people here to put their mind around.
Yeah.
But when I say, this is one of my favorite sayings, I say, if time travel is possible, has ever been possible, will ever be possible, it is with us now.
Correct.
Can you guess how many forms of time travel there can be? If that statement is true.
Yes.
8.
8? Okay. Because?
8, not 3. 8. I was discussing with someone here recently an old saying that has been employed by people in the arcane for a long time, and it is out between two worlds. And to understand that is to understand the 5th form of time travel.
Okay.
What Napoleon experienced was intruded upon him.
Yeah.
And there was a conspiracy to have him in there at that particular time.
Right.
It was a setup, and it involved one of his
the general, yeah.
Yeah.
And afterward, you said he went to a tomb of a pharaoh and took out a very priceless quantity of electrum, which is a combination of gold and silver.
Yes. Before that, he had his cannoneer fire on the face of the Sphinx and knocked that chunk out of the face.
Right.
And then he went to the Valley of the Kings and found Horemheb, or Horem-Hobab, as I call him.
Yeah.
His tomb, and it was sealed. It was undiscovered, and he went right to it.
Uh-huh.
So what he had possession, as well as having had a chip put in his head to affect his behavior.
Yeah.
He had been shortly there because this is an attribute of a time phase, and in his case, a time portal that was open to bring these critters in to modify him.
Wow.
He acquired extra knowledge, and that extra knowledge was expensive because there for a moment he had access to his genetic memory, something people with split consciousness don't have.
Yeah. I'm just curious about the electrum, that quantity, very valuable quantity. Was it ever recovered by someone?
No. It's in the first oasis village on the way back to France.
Huh.
Because he wore out team after team of horses trying to drag it.
Yeah.
It's 20 feet high, 3 feet in diameter.
Good Lord.
It's 60% gold and 40% silver. It's a pillar.
But not an obelisk?
No, a pillar.
Just a pillar. Okay, well, I remember reading that the capstones were either coated in electrum or made of electrum. Is that true?
No, you're thinking about the very top of the pyramid. When they refer to capstones, they're talking about what the Great Pyramid was covered with, limestones.
Okay.
Those were capstones.
Okay, then I may be thinking the top of obelisks sometimes were coated in electrum. I know it plays a part in there somewhere.
Yes. It's hard to know for sure because most of that would have been recorded in Latin and have been in the Etruscan texts that were suppressed along with the Etruscan scrolls.
Yeah.
Today, they would either be in the Vatican, in the secret archives of the Vatican, or in the Etruscan room at Cambridge.
I see. Well, it's just so fascinating that you are bringing this up specifically about the timelines, because I spoke with an Australian shaman last week about this and the real serious implications of it on multiple levels. But I'm trying to formulate the right question because this is bizarre. We're living on a false timeline or a parallel timeline that was generated for basically evil intent.
I would define it as an alternate timeline.
Alternate timeline.
Because with respect to the base timeline, it's a partial manifestation.
Partial manifestation, okay. And why would you call it partial?
Because if they do not perform this time travel where they interfere with the continuum, they interfere with history.
Yes.
Because in the base timeline, Napoleon wins at Waterloo.
Okay.
If they don't do that, then this alternate timeline won't exist. And most everybody that you know, most everybody on the earth today will never have been born.
I see.
Their spirit would still exist, and they might be born as a different person.
Yeah.
But it'll wash this alternate timeline out, which might be preferable to what's happening and to what seems to be becoming more and more inevitable to this one because things are out of control.
Yeah.
But one has to look at what the change in Napoleon has done.
Yes.
To the world it has created in this timeline.
Right. Understood.
And it has, yeah.
Here's the thing. This shaman was telling me that we're coming up on a conjunction, but he wasn't specific of what that meant. He just said, starting in mid-August, there's this thing happening. He basically said there was two timelines. And now talking to you, actually listening to previous interviews, hearing what you have to say about all this, it's starting to come clear to me that, if I understand you correctly, if they don't succeed there's a way of closing the loop, okay? In order to make this a permanent timeline, that event in September has to occur. Otherwise, this timeline just vanishes, right?
Well, what they're trying to do is monstrous, and it'll destroy both timelines.
Both?
What the monsters are trying to do with their experiments in microparticles and subatomic particles is destroy the base timeline.
The base timeline, okay.
And they'll destroy everything.
Everything.
That is the singularity that physicists have been talking about. I'm giving you the formula for it. And I've never said this before, and it's very dangerous, but you have an audience. If it gets out among thousands of people, then there won't be any repercussions to you.
Okay, then...
Because there's no use in trying to suppress it.
Yes, then I need you to be a little more specific since you brought it up, because I'm not sure I understand what you're saying about the formula.
Well, what they want to do is create such a massive energy burst that it'll affect the sun.
Oh.
And if they can do that, I'm not going to say one way or the other, just like I won't give you information about the base timeline.
Yes.
And there are people that have plagued me to try to find out, well, is it better in the base timeline? No, I can't tell you that. Don't ask. If I give any information out, any specific information, I create a third option, which can become a third timeline.
I understand the implications of all that, but I am curious. You don't have to answer this, but did you read the article I sent you about the island that my friend Eddie ended up on?
I never received it. When did you send it?
I sent it to you. Indulge me for just a moment. There was a friend of mine who was in the Navy who was testing the F-14 over the Pacific, and it was July 4th of 1975 when he entered a green fog. He lost both his engines and his radio. He came down below the clouds, and there was an island down there that was not on a map. He ended up making an emergency landing there and living there for 6 months. He couldn't get a signal out. His emergency radio, not the one in the plane, but the one, that be standard issue that's got a transponder and a battery-powered emergency radio. He said when he tried to send a signal out, it would ping back. He said he'd never heard anything like it before. He's there for 6 months, And he said just everything about this island did not make sense to him. These people that were living there were completely normal, but they were extremely healthy. They lived long lives. There wasn't even any biting insects, no rats. They had no money, no electricity, but they lived a perfectly bountiful life. All they had to do was treat each other well. Everything else was provided for them. Occasionally ships would wreck, and they would salvage the stuff off of that. And occasionally planes would wreck. But my friend Eddie, it's not his real name, he never saw any other people on the island other than these natives who spoke English with a French accent, but they had their own language. And he said he got the feeling from them that they knew a lot more than they were telling him. After about 6 months, they said, it's time for you to go. And he said, what do you mean? I mean, I told you from the first day I got here, I need to go back to where I belong, to meet with my unit. And they said, well, it's time now. Just get into the canoe and, we'll bring your stuff and we'll take you out there and you'll be fine. So he says goodbye to the village. They paddle out past the reef, put him in his life raft with his gear, say goodbye to him. And just about a couple minutes later, after they had crossed over a certain area, the entire island vanished in a flash of white light. He said there was a little bit of green fog over the island at the time, too, but he couldn't understand how that much energy could suddenly just, poof like that. He said no sound whatsoever. There was a slight breeze, and that was about it. And he said the whole thing was gone. And then his radio worked, and he was able to contact an AWAC. Anyway, I'm going to send you the story. You can read it for yourself and realize that there's a lot more to it than this. And I think you're offering the best explanation so far, because I'd asked my friend, I said, well, the stars and everything in place? He said, yes, the Southern Cross was where it was supposed to be. The moon, the sun, everything was normal. He says there was no big storms, no major storms hit the island in 6 months. There was nobody that visited. There was no ships that passed by. There was no aircraft that came overhead. So it's like the people there, they knew about us, but they weren't us. They weren't, or they aren't.
Have you ever read Jules Verne?
Oh, absolutely.
You know about Captain Nemo?
Of course.
That's where Captain Nemo is from. It really was Captain Nemo.
Okay, so he wrote about it as fiction to...
Yes. In his day and time, everyone would have thought he was crazy, would have thought he was nuts. But Verne had his ear to something.
I understand. So did the guy that wrote Alice in Wonderland.
Lewis Carroll had his eye to opium.
Well, however, he came to the awareness. I don't think he was just talking about that, because he was also a very highly skilled mathematician.
Oh, no. It was perfectly legal in his day and time, and it's something that you do when you're so fed up with the mundane on this side.
Well, yes, but I believe he did get a glimpse, no matter how it came upon him. It seems to me that what he saw or experienced was the only way he could write about it was as fiction. And so that's why he did that.
There's a lot of that. There was a series on television here recently that they shut down because it was getting too close to the secrets of the second technology they're employing now. And it was called Nowhere Man.
No, I'd never seen it.
In Nowhere Man, let me give you an example. Are you familiar with Lady Gaga?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Well, in Poker Face, you see an entirely different physique in Lady Gaga than you do in her subsequent music videos.
Okay.
Things so remarkable that it is unnatural. And it is unnatural except that second technology in the form of body sculpting has been applied on her, something that costs millions of dollars. And in this show, Nowhere Man, they show you how it's done.
Wow.
It's fiction, of course, and it's a slightly different rendition, but they show you a contraption that can soften bones so they can be reshaped, et cetera, et cetera.
Whoa. Okay. There was a show called Fringe, which I didn't really like. I don't like to watch television, but somebody had recommended that I watch it, so it kind of reminded me, it's very, very similar, things like Lost and Fringe, and all these things keep popping up. Whitley Strieber wrote a novel called 2012 about these portals between worlds, how they kind of blend our timelines, it's really what it is. I guess they're sort of out of phase with one another, but occasionally they do interface. But what you're describing, though, is intentional. That was deliberate when you called the base timeline that we were all on up until that point.
Well, there are methods of time travel that do not harm the continuum.
Okay, good to know.
The form I use is time compression. That way, as an observer, I can go anywhere, anytime I want and observe. find out what the truth is.
I see.
And then another thing I can do is that because of the errant experiments that have been run in interdimensionalism, in which I can show you examples of if you stayed with me for a week, just in my western sky. Kevin Smith saw them. So because of that, in hydrogen bombs change time. And Robert Oppenheimer knew that.
Could you please explain that, what you just said? I heard what you said, but what specifically do you mean?
What is the timekeeper of the solar system?
The sun?
That's right. So if you match the sun in energy, you change time.
Is that why they want to turn the planet into a second sun?
They don't want to turn the planet into a second sun, but that is what's going to happen if they start this depopulation of 95% of all the people on Earth in earnest.
Yeah.
This will be the 7th extinction. It will be the last.
Okay.
And it's almost biblical, by the way.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, the EMVs will be pulled from the sun. A CME will hit the Earth and decimate it, and it will ignite.
Yes, it's coming back to me what you told me before, that there are these benevolent ones who have these crafts stationed, and I think you said they're like living entities, these EMVs, that are stationed around the sun, that are protecting this world, this garden, soul garden, as I like to think of it.
I like that euphemism, soul garden. That's very nice.
Well, thanks. It's just the way I see it. I think we're all seeds of light. Our souls are seeds of light that were born from a very mature soul at the birth of this universe. I'm sure that there's infinite numbers of universes.
You should be a poet, Robert.
That's what Kevin said the other day. I told him something about, what did I say? That we'd have peace in the world if everybody did want a piece of the world. And he's like, oh, did you write that? that's the lyrics. You know, like, so, yes, I'm starting to see now, I'm starting to feel this affinity or kinship with you. I thought it was just because you're Czech, okay? I mean, I told you before off there that on my father's side is pure Czech, and there's a uniqueness to that culture.
After all, who invented the word robot?
Exactly. And that was one of my favorite toys when I was a kid, and that was kind of my nickname, Robbie the Robot. It's not like I wanted to be one. It's just that somehow I had this real appreciation for them, and I think it goes way back, because my understanding is that there really is artificial intelligences. Possibly that's what you're trying to say about the EMVs, that they are just simply assigned, and yet they're more than just machines. They're like, they're artificial life forms, but they're still life forms, right?
They're life forms. They are absolutely life forms.
Okay, but are they natural or artificially? Not that it matters. I'm just asking.
Well, in the ultimate scheme of things, everything's designed so it's artificial, isn't it? It
has to be, because there's an extension from something original. If you want to make it just very simple, nothing is inorganic. It can't be, because it's all coming from the same source. And that's the thing about that physics is just incredibly ignorant about. The current model is actually on some level criminal, because they talk about, energy and matter are the same thing, but they never identify where is it all coming from. And I spent some time studying this. And my favorite one, I think the most applicable one, is called digital physics. And it's just pretty simple, is that everything is consciousness, and that consciousness comes in three-phase states, which is consciousness, energy, and matter. Well, it has to. But here's why I get upset about it, James, is because we have an ability, an innate ability that's built into us, because everything's holographic, right? So as seeds, so our souls are seeds of light from a parent soul. Therefore, we have that ability to create with our consciousness, but it's being completely, not diminished, but growth is being inhibited by something that, in my view, is parasitic. Sometimes it's predatory, but it's also unsustainable. And as part of what I felt recently, I woke up, my dog woke me up real early one morning about a week ago, and I'm watching the sunrise, and I just got this feeling that something was shifting dramatically. I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't autumn. We're not there yet. We're not really, because I know the difference. I've really felt something was shifting towards a brighter day. It's through conversations with people like yourself that things are starting now to really come clear to me. And not that it matters what I think.
No, Well, it does matter. It does, Robert.
Okay, I mean, I'm just one person. However, it does matter because if I'm not clear on something, I shouldn't even be talking about it because, as you said, we're speaking to, I don't even know. All I know is this message is going around the world, especially over time. Because of digital technology, people access the archives, and if it resonates, the thing goes viral, and consciousness can be shifted quite rapidly now for good or ill in this current world.
Nothing dies to the universe.
That's for sure. Well, look, this is the thing. The only thing a life gives us is memories. That's the only thing that we can take away. Our soul goes away enriched by the experiences that we call memories. And it's very important. That's essential. I mean, that's one of the things that we're doing here in this soul garden. It's not just evolving. We're maturing. We are maturing as gods, creators, and at some point we have the potential as seeds of light from the parent soul. We can literally birth an entire universe of our own making if we so choose at a given time. The potential's there. That's what a seed is, right? It's just a potential. You can hold an entire oak tree in your hand in the form of an acorn. All the information is there. It just needs the proper environment in order to bloom. So it's an organic process. Anyway, I'm sorry. Here I am. I'm wandering off again. What you're saying, James, I feel very fortunate that you would agree to speak with me and this audience about it because I think it's an understatement to say that this is big. I think the language sort of isn't there to try to really explain. Let's put it this way. You can't simply state it in a word or a sentence. What you're talking about is truly life-altering for everything on this planet and this timeline.
Well, it's not like it hasn't happened before.
Well, I understand that, but when you're talking about some of the implications of something like this, I'm trying to choose my words carefully. I don't want to misconstrue it, and I'm trying to have a conversation too, but it's difficult because if I understand you correctly, it has literally boggled my mind once again, and I thought I was kind of up on things, but apparently there's still a lot to learn, and that's a good thing. I think that's actually wonderful to know that we can always keep learning and growing. But part of that is we have to take responsibility for our thoughts.
No, we have to stop trying to look for the hostile alien and for the reptoid and all this crap, which is put out there to rob us of our power of self-determination.
Yes.
And when we get our self-determination back, we're not going to put up with this insane mess that's going on today. We're thought of as just simply pawns on a board to move around by the powers that be any way they like, and then to throw us away when they want to.
Simply as a matter of convenience. And actually, that's what I was reading about Napoleon in Egypt when he was ready to leave. That was horrible. He was acting very inhuman, even to his own troops.
Well, I think you were reading English propaganda.
It could be, yes.
Because Napoleon did change. There was a change on him.
Yeah.
They'll never tell you what that chip in his head is, but they know. And that chip was only perfected recently.
Yes, I'd heard you mention that. So why don't you tell the audience exactly where it came from and what it's good for, or what it's used for, I should say.
Are you familiar with the Clipper chips?
Yeah, I think they put them in all the computers as a backdoor for government agencies so that they could hack into any computer.
When the company that started making them had progressed to a point where they could actually use them for feed into the brain, that was the Generation 3.
Okay.
Now they've got a Generation 4, and that's what's in Napoleon's skull. It was more than that put into television sets, and I had one of the television sets that had one that I bought back when there were still video cassettes, because I bought a little 25-inch television set, and one day I had the television set off. It was plugged into the wall, and all of a sudden I hear da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, and I look up on the screen, and there are these green numerals going across binary and Arabic. And what's happening is that Clipper chip in that television set is being activated by satellite. So after that, if I put the television set on now, I could use it to track the space shuttles, the satellites, everything going on within the gravity of the Earth, outside the stratosphere. It was fantastic. But I didn't like the idea of being spied upon. I was going through a divorce, and when my ex-wife, who was involved in black ops herself, when she was opining that her television set went out, I said, I have a brand new one. Would you like it?
Okay. You think that was in all the televisions of that time, or are they still in there now?
No.
Yours. Okay.
Who knows? But I know that I've been a subject of interest since I was 4 years old.
Whoa. Okay. So now you're saying the third generation Clipper chip it's an RFID, or is it something more?
Well, that just means radio frequency implant device.
Yes.
Now, they had that back during the Kennedy assassination, and they had one of those in Ruby's head.
Wow.
And back then, they called it the same thing. It was developed by a corporation in Argentina that no one's ever heard about, but it's one of the largest corporations in the world. It's Bunt, and it was founded with SS Gold money.
Okay.
But they had completed it, and that corporation made $800 million, which was big money in 1963.
Yeah.
They made $800 million on the stock market the second day after the assassination because two things came together to drive the commodities market down 40 points, which is fantastic. And they had bought long.
Oh.
So everybody who bought short lost their securities.
Yeah.
And who picked them up? The company that bought long.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
$800 million worth. That would equate to, I'd say, 7 or 8 billion today or
Right.
more.
So the technology has evolved to the point now, how in the heck are they going to implant these in people going forward?
Well, they're working on using a nanotech probe.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, you go back to a doctor, and he is in practice, of course, and wants to keep his license, so he'll do what he's told.
Okay.
And if they have you around ether or any other devices that they don't talk about,
Yeah.
they have a way of using radon gas on you. And then they can put something in you. They can put it in your tooth.
Right.
The dentist can put it in.
Yes, I've heard of that. Do you think that's what people like Whitley Strieber have implanted in them?
I'm sure of it. I'm sure that Strieber has, and I know other people that have gone to these UFO fairs, and there's a guy there that's got a barcode reader, and that's all it is.
Whoa.
And he can detect the more recent ones, but not the most recent ones. The most recent ones are more biological than would be detected by that means, but there are other means by which they can be detected.
Right.
They're sophisticated enough today to give you cancer. There is an energy beam they can hit you with to cause a heart attack or a stroke. You know, the monsters are really good at devising weapons, but that's all they're good for.
Now, these monsters, not that it matters, I'm just kind of curious, are they indigenous or not?
You mean inbred?
No, I mean the monsters that are here, are they originally from here or not?
Of course they are.
They are?
Of course they are.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, there's no other system to compare with the rottenness of this one.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things I try to explain is when you get the technology, if you get as far as star travel, you have overcome this. You don't have aberrancy, either collective or individually. You can't have, because one person can hold in their hand the ability to destroy a planet.
Wow. Right.
So you have been civilized out of necessity.
Huh.
And this is common sense will dictate this to you.
Okay. Yeah. This goes back to what you said before. There's sort of a level of benevolent enforcement so that we don't spread like a contagion. Isn't that?
Well, you have been indulged because the universe has a consciousness.
Right.
And it is constantly looking for variation.
Yes.
And, you know, the question is here whether the split consciousness can survive in its qualities, part of the universe's variation, because it has intensity, beauty, creativity, all sorts of wondrous things that have just kind of died out among the ETs. The ETs, usually they'll group what they call extended communities, and they don't have anything this intense. And so you are the wonder of the universe.
Huh.
At least of this galaxy, and there are a lot of people that would like to see this come to a happy ending.
Good. That's
but
good.
Then there are a lot of people that don't.
Yes, I realize that. So it is like a giant chessboard in some regard.
Sadly.
Yeah.
Sadly. That's not by the design of ET. That's just by the design of how things develop and what happens. You're given plenty of room.
Yeah.
It's what you do with it that's going to determine the outcome, and you're not doing well.
Right. That's pretty obvious. So what can we do better, James? How can we make this thing work better?
Well, you have a number of people that are on the inside that know what these monsters are and despise them more than we do because they know more about what they're up to. They have resented being used and lied to.
Mm-hmm.
When Snowden came out, he had as much disinformation on issues as he had otherwise, but he may not have known that because they feed their own people this lies and deceit.
Yeah.
And this is what people like Rappaport, the journalists, don't understand.
Yeah.
Or he'd get off Snowden's back and stop trying to debunk him.
Well, he's not the only one that's come forward from those agencies over the years, right?
Oh, that's right. And if you will remember, every single one of them has had their debunkers right at their heels.
Oh, yeah, sure. Of course.
The proof is in the pudding, and people like Assange and Hastings and Snowden all came out with something that showed, that opened up to the general population that much more what we've been trying to reach them with. And they had the documentation to back it up, which we didn't have, did we?
No, absolutely not.
So they did good. They did good. And they shouldn't be impugned in any way.
Right.
Because as far as I'm concerned, they're greater heroes than the world has seen in a long time. I know that they don't look like heroes to most people or act like heroes to most people, but they are.
Right. I agree. I know this is slightly divergent, but I just have to ask you, do you know why there's so many sinkholes occurring on the planet at this time?
Mostly two reasons, and that is extraction of oil and gas.
Uh-huh.
The oil and gas has a viscosity that supports crustal movement.
Yes.
And the seawater they replace it with doesn't.
Oh, Jesus. Yes, that's right. Why didn't I think of that? That's right. They pump water in there. Oh, God.
So you owe me 50 cents for the information since it clicks, right?
do you take PayPal?
No.
All right.
I want a silver 50-cent piece.
Okay. That's a deal. That's a good one. You know, that's frightening. I mean, and yes, I knew there had to be an answer, and I just wasn't finding it anywhere, so I thought I would at least ask. And there you are, the Oracle of Sinkholes. That's pretty amazing.
I thank you. I haven't been called an oracle before.
Oh, well, you know, I think that's a badge of honor, actually. At least it used to be with the Greeks, so.
Well, you bring up the Greeks. Have you ever read the Oresteia, which is 3 plays by Aeschylus?
No. I missed that one, sorry.
It has the most famous 3 plays, you know, Oedipus.
Okay, I remember that one, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Begins with Agamemnon getting killed, and you know what's neat about that is the oracle had prophesied he would be killed by neither man or woman, neither on land or in the sea. And so when he came back from the Trojan campaign, his wife, who had taken a lover, took a battle axe and waited as he was getting out of the shower, and with her and her lover's hand on the axe, slew him.
Oh, my God. Okay.
That's where the Oresteia starts.
Yeah.
And goes on from there.
All right.
It's better. It gets better.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, okay, now as far as our narrative goes, I have to ask again because I'm not sure I understood. What can we do individually? Because I think that's really where it starts. Individually, what can we do to get back onto the base timeline? Is there anything that we can do?
I'll answer that after the September 9th because that is when they either do it or not. If they do it, then at least this timeline will play out. Maybe something will happen where, well, I can't, I really don't want to go into detail.
Okay, how about this? How about this? You see, you started cracking the door on this, so, because, you know, it seems like group visualization, you know, like meditations and stuff, there's a power to that, because again, we're talking about consciousness. How about people that hear this show visualize that the powers that be, the monsters, as you call them, do not succeed on September 9th in creating a partial timeline. So let's visualize, if we can, that the partial timeline collapses after September 9th because they are not successful traveling back in time and implanting Napoleon. How about that?
Well, this timeline will be as it never existed. All these people will never have been born.
I understand that, but you know what? If it all ends in a blaze of glory at the end of this timeline, if this partial timeline becomes actualized, if they succeed on September 9th and we go forward, there isn't much to live for anyway, because their intention ultimately is to slaughter a good portion of us and enslave the rest. So at this point, I think that what I'm asking people to visualize, of course, it's free will. They don't have to, but I think it's valid, don't you?
Well, I'll be honest, I know what is going on in the base timeline.
I know you do.
And I cannot tell you if it's better or worse.
I don't want
or
you
anything
to.
of the sort. I can't affect it in any way. But let me just say that it's a new option. It's a new option.
Right. Look, we know how this story ends, don't we? If they have their way. No, we don't know if
something may happen. I'll say this, if they do it and we develop rapidly and we oppose what those people, the monsters that have created this alternate timeline,
yes,
if we take their power away from them and we overcome the technology, we find ways of preventing corruption within our system, or maybe even revamp the system entirely so that that is more plausible.
Okay.
And if we realize the limitations of split consciousness on one hand, and then the strengths of the split consciousness, and stop feeding our children lies and programming them to be just like us, uncivilized.
Right.
If we do these things, something wondrous may happen. Now, that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
That is nothing about that.
All right. So this is another option. What you're explaining to me, I can see it. I can see what you're saying. Rather than collapsing this timeline, we literally confront those who created this corrupt partial timeline we're on now. If all of us going forward take greater responsibility for our consciousness and our future, that this could actually have a very beneficial outcome. Even though we're on this corrupt timeline, we could actually make a course correction based on our consciousness and actually end up in a better place, right?
I can't make promises, but I'll say this. There's a possibility for something wondrous
Understood.
occurring.
James, I know that. The potential is always there. As I said, we're seeds of light. We are gods that have been deferred, interrupted the journey. You know, as you say, these monsters, whatever you want to call them, they're weeds in the garden, okay? That's really what they are. That's what weeds are. They're life forms, but they're inhibiting the growth of things that are actually more beneficial to the overall ecosystem.
Somewhere in the process of coming to terms with their adulthood or whatever, the process that these people go through is dehumanizing.
Clearly.
And this has been going on throughout civilizations and lineages for pretty close to 250,000 years on this planet.
Right.
And it has produced this elitism that is malignant.
Yes, it is. Clearly.
Criminal.
Now, one of the things I think I sent you, but probably didn't get this link either, to the Declaration of Sovereignty that I drafted. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Oh, you saw that?
Well, I know about a number of people that started sovereignty movements a long time ago who have developed constitutional law. They call it common law.
I understand that. Here's the thing, and I've seen some of that. That's not what I did, all right? This is very simple. Anybody can make this declaration. It's on my website at unicusmagazine.com. Just click on articles. It is the first link. It's called the Declaration of Solar Sovereignty, and here's what it says. I state your name. Hereby declare that as a divine seed of light created by the Father of this universe, I am a sovereign soul. Therefore, I demand that all negative entities immediately withdraw from my home planet Earth and its surrounding solar system. So be it. Very simple, James. It's not like a huge contract.
It would have been in firm agreement with Akhenaten.
Yes, right.
I mean, that is Egyptian. I mean, the wording, you show a great deal of Egyptian influence in that.
It's part of me. Specifically, the one that they called Hermes or Thoth. He was Mercury. He was so many. And he was a scribe, too, and I still was curious where they put all the books that he wrote. Obviously, they didn't want us to have access to his wisdom, but I actually read quite a bit of what I could find of his work, and I see it is the origins of the original teachings of Freemasonry, of the neutral path. Between duality, there's always the neutral path, and that was a big part of it. But yes, I mean, look, I took an initiation at the Great Pyramid at age 15. I didn't know that was going to happen, much like I'm sure Napoleon didn't know it was going to happen either. I don't think I was implanted, but I think there was a dramatic shift. You know,
you're not implanted.
No. I don't feel like I am. I'm just saying, but the experience that I had there changed me. It had a profound effect on me. And I mean, as the Gnostics say, that truly the word means knowing. The only way to truly know something
so
is
you're aware of the Gnostics.
Very much so. Yeah. And obviously they inherited that wisdom from the uncorrupted teachings of people like Hermes, because he clearly was well informed.
Most Christians would resent that statement very much,
yes,
because they think Gnosticism began with Jesus Christ, and it didn't.
No, it didn't. Of course it didn't. And in fact, they took a very different view. It's one of the reasons that they were slaughtered. Well, look, they were the original. They had an original fundamental understanding of who Christ was as an avatar, that he couldn't be killed because he wasn't physically here. He had no physical body, according to them, to be killed. And again, once the church came up with their narrative of how things happen and how things should happen and how people should worship the church, then the Gnostics became a threat. And every group after that held Gnostic views, which are truly Egyptian in origin, they were all slaughtered. Every last one of them was ground into the dust by the church because they didn't want any contra-narrative to be out there in the public's mind.
Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls, what we have learned since they fell in the hands of people that would translate them and not suppress them, is that Christ was an Essene monk.
Correct. I understand that.
Well, among these Essene monks, perhaps there were Gnostics.
Oh, of course. Well, or at least the Gnostic influence. I mean, look, where did Jesus go when they were hunting him? He went into Egypt. Now, at that time, it was full of people that had Gnostic knowledge. Clearly. Especially, where did he go during the missing years? Some people say India, which wouldn't have been a bad thing, but certainly Egypt was right next door. He could have easily been initiated there. I know he was part of the Essene movement, but he didn't just stay there his entire life, as brief as it was.
Well, there are a lot of interesting stories about where else he might have gone.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. But I'll tell you this much. Most humans, never gained access to the upper chambers of the Great Pyramid until it was broken into in 820 AD. Okay? We didn't go there. There was a secret doorway about 50 feet up that allowed you to the lower chamber. If you could get in, you were allowed to go to the lower chamber, but the upper chambers were plugged. So very few people actually on this planet in modern history have actually gone into the upper chambers because they were only recently opened.
Well, the big problem, the one thing that suppressed the papyrus from Tutankhamun's tomb was something that Jews have used their influence and power to suppress now for 100 years, more. And like I said, the 33rd degree Masons and above know what that is. And what it is that there was no Hebrew nation before Akhenaten, and Akhenaten was Moses. Now that blows a lot of boats out of the water, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It certainly does.
So all that fairy tale about Abraham and so forth, it's all lies, mythology.
Yes, I understand.
It's something to give a tribe of slaves a leg up on the rest of the world if they could expound the propaganda as they have.
Yes.
And then create Christian Zionism, which is the greatest mental aberration on earth.
Yes.
I mean, think of the identity crisis that exists whenever you're a Christian and you're told, well, the Jews are really God's chosen people, but you can serve them.
Yeah. Well, I understand.
That's enslavement, isn't it?
Well, the funny thing is that they were supposedly enslaved by the Romans, but through Christianity, they actually ensnared them in this false narrative, and essentially that has, guided the world forward. I'm not a fan of any organized religion. You can see the disclaimer at my website. I'm not affiliated with any religious or political or philosophical organizations because, in my opinion, they're all corrupt, and they're designed to control mankind, not empower us.
Yes. Yes.
So, again, it comes back to personal responsibility. And how else are you going to know what's true, really, unless you do your homework?
Well, if you study, if you try putting things together and you work hard enough, the mind will snap it together for you. It's like a prayer. You do everything you're supposed to do. You do your homework and you resign yourself to the outcome. Something comes to you.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what we're talking about here. I don't expect people to take a thing I say for face value. I'm putting the possibility in their heads.
Right.
And it's for them to make of it what they will. And that's free will. That is up to how they choose to use their free will. Now, there are a lot of people whose comfort zone I disturb, but they can't afford to be that way any longer. They can't afford to indulge that comfort zone any longer. They've got to face up to hard truths if they're going to be part of changing this world. And if this world isn't changed, and soon, it won't exist. And it'll be as if it never was.
Yes, I can see a couple scenarios where what you said is absolutely correct. Right? It's not just one or the other. It could be either or. Well, actually, I see three scenarios playing out, but two of them basically we just...
Now, don't you create another alternate timeline, okay?
I'll do my best.
Not to.
No, I'll do my best not to, but I'm seeing what you're saying. That if the monsters have their way, ultimately this thing could play out. If we do nothing, they get their way, it plays out, and what do you call them, the EMVs move away from the sun and the planet gets incinerated.
Yeah. What's bad and what I've introduced tonight is this, that they're not content with having to worry about what I've suggested happening because they have hidden the truth about the EMVs for many, many years. They've known they were there.
Yeah.
They know that they are necessary, that they form the energy of the sun, and if they didn't, that there would be, on the average, a CME that would decimate every 17 years. They know that.
Who's they?
The people that they put through school and go to the best institutions where they are given everything they need to produce helpful results. Okay. And, of course, these people are all committed either to CFR or the Trilateral Commission or maybe the Illuminati.
Yeah.
They're all committed to them.
Yeah.
And their families, they don't have to worry about their loyalties. So they know what I'm talking about. And that is why they have created the Office of Astronomical Telegrams, and that's why they've censored the TPL phenomena, which used to be archived and open to the public for 150 years or 200 years.
What is a TPL?
Transient Lunar Phenomena.
Oh, that's TLP.
Yeah.
TLP,
yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's okay. James, have you heard this one? It's called these magnetic connections, ropes. They refer to them as ropes. It's, I'm sorry, blanking on the exact term that they use, but there's an energetic connection between...
Tethers?
Well, not tethers. They're not exactly ropes. It's called a energy transfer event, flux transfer event. Anyway, what it is just these ribbons of magnetic energy that connect from the sun to the earth, and they connect, disconnect, connect.
Oh, yeah.
Flux transfer event. I think that's what it's called. What is the purpose of that? Do you know?
This is a technology related to the solar anvil.
The solar what?
The solar anvil.
Anvil.
Yep. That's what I named it. I have a friend that does videos for myself and colleagues.
Yes.
Shuni. And one day he says where the solar anvil is showing up in some Soho images, and he says, well, what is that? And so I explained, he says, what's its name? And I said, well, there is no name for it. He said, well, give me a name.
Okay.
So I said, okay, solar anvil.
I see. That's how that came up. All right.
Well, you know about stargates.
Yes.
Well, this is a portal, and a portal is so much more than a stargate because you've got craft the size of Earth coming from very, very far in deep space, able to use the word teleport, but there's more to it than that, come through in an instant into this part of the galaxy. This is an outpost.
Yeah.
Our solar system is an outpost of the Milky Way galaxy.
Yeah, it's pretty far out, yeah.
Yeah. And we have captured images of extremely large cylindrical craft, three.
Yeah.
coming through and heading out, coming through the portal and heading out through the sun very quickly so they don't have to run their energy down with shielding from solar.
Okay, I think you told me about this before. You're saying that the sun is actually a portal?
Well, it's in a strategic place, so it has had a solar anvil for 500,000 years.
Okay.
This solar system has been inhabited by very advanced civilizations, and at the time that your ancestors came into it, there was a very advanced civilization just getting ready to ascend to spiritual technology on Mars,
I see.
where you decided to land first.
I see. Would you call the EMVs, it's these very large craft, is that what?
No, these were people that weren't even involved in the extended community of this neighborhood of the galaxy. These were on their way somewhere else.
Oh.
But everybody works together out there.
Yes. Please explain again, because it's foggy to me. What is an EMV?
Electromotive vehicle. Now, that's not my name for them, but that's a name that I honor because I have such great respect for the man that gave them that name, and that's Dr. Berggren.
Okay. So was he an astronomer?
No, Dr. Berggren was a scientist working for Ames, and he had worked for JPL-2 and did work for NASA and other agencies and so forth over his career. He was very well respected.
I see. And
he was recently interviewed by Carrie Cassidy, who did a hatchet job on him, so to speak.
Yes, I understand. That's too bad. Not surprised. Okay, so these things have been there for a long time. It's all part of the process. Okay, please turn down your computer. All right, so would you like to ask a question or make a comment?
I have a question.
Okay.
And my question is what we call the monsters. Why would they not want to go ahead on September 9th?
Did you hear that, James?
Yes, that's a good question, and I'm sure that the monsters are a lost cause. I'm talking about the elite families, the 300 families that make up the elite. But I'm hoping they're facilitators, the scientists and technicians that are running a couple of instruments that are necessary for this time intrusion. I'm hoping that they will kind of scuttle it. But, of course, I have mixed feelings. I hate to see people that I've grown very fond of, and, you know, the works of Beethoven, Mozart, and Bach, and a number of great works of literature, I hate to see them go down the drain. My memory isn't good enough to preserve all of them.
I have one other question. Is it all right if I ask?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Sure.
My other question is you mentioned on another interview that supposedly they had gone back. It's only been done once, and that was with Napoleon. But then you mentioned also that some of the other Egyptian pharaohs had chips in them. How is that?
Well, not chips, but they had elongated heads. When the Upper and Lower Nile were first united into one kingdom, there was a pharaonic dynasty of ETs. And they had elongated heads, and that's why the headdress was designed to hide that. They knew more about genetics than modern medicine and science did up until about World War II. And they understood that how to pass their bloodline on by duplicating the attributes of the last pharaoh as much as possible. The niece and maternal father were a closer match, and that the nephew and the maternal aunt were a closer match to produce a closer genetic duplicate of that prior pharaoh, and that's what they did. In fact, they had that pattern more or less down until the Ptolemaic dynasty, when that changed, because Ptolemy was not even Egyptian.
Well, what was he?
He was a general of Alexander's.
Okay, makes sense.
Alexander conquered Egypt, Mesopotamia, Ethiopia, Persia. And when he died, the generals divided up the nations or the territory that had been conquered, and Ptolemy took Egypt.
Like so many other countries have tried to do over the centuries.
Yeah.
Thank you for the call.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, so I think Ed was trying to call in. Ed, if you're out there, this is your chance. Again, Ed, you're on the air.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi, James.
Hello.
Like, a couple questions.
Go ahead.
EMVs. would you consider that ascended machine technology?
Well, I'll tell you how they're euphemistically phrased by some ETs. They're considered the hand of God.
Wow.
Okay.
And that's, I explained that, I'm associated with the EMVs, and I'm no closer to the face of God than you. So, I'm not going to pontificate anything or represent something I'm not. But the EMVs are not cognitive. They have a language, and it's emotional. And it's beautiful language, and they are task-driven. They're precisely what they have to be unapproachable and incorruptible.
Wow.
So they're like protectors of the solar system?
They're creators of solar systems.
Okay. So they're kind of like sitting there waiting to see what we're going to do.
They're probably not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of funny.
Yeah,
they're all over the universe. Wherever there is intelligent life, they are the caretaker of that intelligent life.
Well, James, you're talking about timelines. Now, what's to say that everyone's got to go on one timeline? If the negatives want to continue on their negative path, why can't they just go on a negative timeline and the positive ones go on a positive timeline? Like, I know there's a bunch of different theories about parallel or a new Earth or.
Have you heard them talk about a singularity?
Who? Who's them?
Physicists.
They talk about singularity.
Connection with the Hadron Collider.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, what's your take on that? What do you think that they're doing when they're talking about a singularity?
Well, I guess they're trying to find the God particle.
They're trying to play God.
They're trying to play God with that particle, yeah. The energy release, it's what James told us before, that the atomic bombs actually change time, right? Isn't that what you said, James?
Yes.
Okay, so...
Well, the hydrogen bombs, not the atomic.
Right, hydrogen bombs.
Because the hydrogen reaches the fusion temperature of the sun.
I see what you're saying, that they are looking for a way to release enough energy that they can control time.
Well, that they can destroy the base timeline.
Oh, God.
And this timeline will become inherent.
Okay, no, there you go.
It will destroy everything.
Everything in the process, yes.
It is a singularity. That's what a singularity does.
Right, it consumes everything. Got you. Like a black hole.
Isn't that not going to be permitted by the advanced good guy ETs?
Well, you can't expect to be saved from yourselves. And the situation is one that you have been asleep. You haven't participated in anything but your own demise. And it has come to this. I'm only speaking out as the last stop hope.
Well, when you have a planet full of people who are, more or less mind-controlled, that don't know what's going on for sure, I mean, I don't have my finger on the switch. There's a very small percentage of the population that are the bad guys, basically.
Well, I agree, and I have very mixed feelings about it. I've done everything I could to buy you as much time as I could. There are ETs that wanted this case closed a long time ago. And there are some of your ancestors that went somewhere else during the migration from Mars to Earth and established elsewhere that are your biggest critics.
Well,
I've been accused of going native and everything else over this.
Well, apparently when they do hydrogen bomb explosions, that goes far-reaching into many different realities.
Yes, it does. You see that, and yet just think, try to understand the clarity of what I say when I say you can't be saved from yourselves. You have to prove that this split consciousness, which is unique, can survive and become civilized. You have to prove that, and you're not doing it.
Right. And Ed, what James said about the EMVs was they're essentially monitoring the situation, and if the monsters do have their way and they start taking us down the path of singularity, if I understand James correctly, the EMVs will simply move off, and the planet will be incinerated before the singularity can be triggered. Isn't that right, James?
Look, I can't answer a question that.
Never mind.
Okay.
I just made the statement then.
Let's say that happens. Okay, so our physical bodies will be no more. Is that going to interfere with our souls?
No.
So as a soul being or as a unit, then we're just going to go off to where we need to be.
You will be denied the memory of this.
Oh, interesting.
That's all. You'll be denied because a failed experiment is, who would want it anyway?
Right. It doesn't serve any purpose for the growth of...
No.
Because here's the thing. As I said, individually we are seeds of light, but collectively we're all part of the hologram. No matter how many times that this creator consciousness divides itself, it'll always be connected to itself. That's what a holographic fractal is. So we have the illusion of individuality. Well, it's a virtual reality, actually. But, I mean, this is part of the beauty of it all, is that it can keep dividing itself again and again and again, but it'll always have some continuity of consciousness. In other words, the copies are not exact. And that's part of what we typically call free will, right? So without it, though, there would be no growth. So
you use the term fractal, and at this level, what we're talking about is fractal, which is layer. You're layering in an aspect of interdimensionalism.
Well, it's,
right, okay.
It's a pattern that repeats itself. Look, each one of us as a seed of light is like a snowflake. A snowflake is a snowflake, right? But it's slightly different patterning each time.
No, I get that.
Yeah, I know you do. I'm talking to the audience through you, Ed.
Oh, okay. All right.
I know you're very aware, and that's why I appreciate you being in the audience.
Here's the deal. Okay, if the higher aspects of ourself are sending portions as a soul unit to different timelines, to different personages for the opportunity of growth in third density reality, there's a lot of advanced beings down here that don't even know they're advanced beings, for crying out loud. And, you can have different aspects of your higher or oversoul projected down here in a third density reality. And if we're all being manipulated to the max through electronics or scalar waves or microwaves and everything else.
Ed, look at you. Look at us. We're having a conversation where we're not allowing them to manipulate us, right? Here's the thing.
That's right.
Ignorance is no excuse for the law. And my understanding of the higher laws of nature or God is to know thyself, okay? It's a sin not to know who you really are and act accordingly.
Right.
At some point, you can't.
A long time.
At some point, we got to stop trying to blame others for our consciousness or lack of responsibility for our consciousness. Because we're not growing if we're constantly blaming somebody else or waiting for someone else to save us from ourselves. Like James would say, you can't do that.
I know.
Okay.
Well, hopefully we can reach some critical mass with the people that are awake. I'm very distraught over this.
Don't be, because...
Well, don't be distraught, because you live in the richest time for awareness and knowledge there is. And you're going to live to see this resolved. This is a time of great awareness. This is an opening. And one way or the other, it will serve. But here's something that you might consider. There are genetic attributes yet to be realized, and the stress will cause them to trigger.
Wow.
And that's what I'm waiting to see.
Wow.
Right.
Hey, you know what I'm seeing is it's a healing crisis. And a lot of times what I've seen working with people in therapy for counseling is that it requires a breakdown before you experience a breakthrough. There is a breakthrough potentially within us that is there, that is going to be triggered. Remember the movie Starman as he was leaving? Just before he left there in Arizona, he said, can I tell you something about you that I noticed? He says, you guys are at your best when things are at their worst.
That's true.
I love that line.
James, I had a download to my crown chakra in 2007 of a bunch of glyphs at very high rate of speed, and heated my body, made it vibrate, kind of a golden light. And I was able to take a mental snapshot of some of it. If you ask me right now what it all meant, I couldn't tell you.
Maybe you will come of that knowledge in your dreams. Do you know how to keep a dream journal?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Great. Well, I want you to put a thought in your head before you go to sleep and keep it there until you fall asleep.
I always do.
And then train yourself to wake up at the culmination of significant dreams. And I'm not talking about what we call lucid dreams, but dreams that have a connection to your reality and your concerns when you're awake. That's more than a lucid dream. I have a friend and a colleague who acquired a great deal of extra knowledge through her dreams. When she was at a point in her life that she wanted to change gears, this can happen to you. And this is your openness. This is your ability to come to a time where the conscious mind is not suppressing the subconscious, and the subconscious comes through and imparts genetic knowledge to you.
Well, when I meditate, I have vibrations set up, and light beings come up to me and check me out. I mean...
Yeah, but, what James is saying is, pose a question. Let's say you want to know what those hieroglyphs say are actually telling you, or good for, but use that as your intent as you fall asleep. Intend to get an answer, and then when you get the answer while you're sleeping, wake up and write it down.
You have to write it down.
Yeah,
I know, it goes quick.
The conscious mind is so afraid of you disturbing that comfort zone it's created because it's a social part of your mind.
Yeah.
The subconscious is the survival part of your mind. It's associated with the thalamus. But as a form of survival, it has access to this genetic knowledge. And, of course, this disturbs the conscious mind. It's trying to fit in with society, and society doesn't want you to be any different than it, right?
I got that all right.
That's right. Make a success sometime. Get a success writing a novel or something that gets published or whatever. They're the first people to get ticked off because you did something that they didn't do.
Yeah.
Your relatives.
Yeah.
Oh, envy, yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I do Dolores Cannons. I'm a quantum healing hypnosis therapist, and call in during the session. You call in the higher self.
Don't use hypnosis. Don't use hypnosis.
Because?
Hypnosis drives the distance, the separation between the conscious mind and the subconscious further and further apart.
Huh.
If you didn't have a split consciousness, you wouldn't be capable of being hypnotized. And what does that serve? That serves the controllers.
Oh, God. Wow.
Serves the controllers. Because a unified consciousness has access to genetic knowledge and the collective consciousness that can be shared, if you know how, with spirits that are not even here.
Yes.
Right. Then you can go to, what Robert Monroe was doing.
And Nostradamus and Edgar Cayce.
Yeah.
They were activating both hemispheres of the brain.
Well, not activating, they were in agreement. They had found a way to bring the two together. It wasn't going to last very long, but long enough for them to get a vision about the truth of the past, the likelihood of the future that no one else had.
May I interject? Based on my understanding, and not just reading, I'm talking about my experience, the middle path between the two hemispheres is called the corpus callosum. That's where the third eye is located. That's also called the cave of Brahma. That is really where enlightenment occurs. Seat of the soul is where it's also been called. I think it's truly misleading to be focused on just left and right because there is something directly in the middle.
Of course.
That's where I know I saw the Father. It's because by going through that cave, I actually entered the light, and that's where I saw him, or he came to me. Jerry's the only other person I know that's actually stood in front of this being. It's quite a story, but anyway, he tells it better than I do. But I'll just say this much. The Creator is also a created being, and that's what I was trying to say about a fractal in the sense it's organic. It's a tree that was born from a seed, that was born from another tree, that was born from a seed. It just keeps repeating itself again and again, and each iteration is slightly different, but we all have a connectivity. And this is the problem. Most of us are disconnected and disoriented. So this is the whole reason we're having this conversation, is to reconnect, reorient, and move forward.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are ready for it. And I think this was what James is talking about. The potential is there. It's dormant. It's being suppressed.
Well, we're touching on the difference between science and the arcane.
Yes.
And science, everything has to be beat out and experimented on. You need a control group and then an experimental group, et cetera, and you're never going to reach any advance like we're discussing now, because by the time, with this methodology, by the time that you get to these subjects that we're discussing, you have died 100,000 times over. But in the arcane, What you're trying to do is you're trying to build a concept that the closer that you carry it to inevitability, the truer it becomes. It becomes real through clarity. That is the arcane knowledge. And this is the only way for the split consciousness to overcome the endemic incredulity it has been exploited to have.
Right. Oh, yes. Extremely misguided. You know, again.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely something going on right now. I'm just seeing it in people. Everyone's kind of getting real quiet.
Well, they're tired of being lied to. They're tired of it. Okay, people see through the lies, but then what? Then where do you go?
Well, that's the big question. Then what?
That is the big question. I mean, I know we've been lied to for over 30 years, like my whole life almost. And I'd bring this stuff up to people, and they would look at me like,
How old are you?
I'm 56.
Do you remember Barry Goldwater? This might have been a little bit before your time, but Barry Goldwater was an Air Force general, and he ran for the presidency.
Yes, I remember that.
Do you know what killed him?
Looking for get into the blue room?
No, he talked about fluoride being a conspiracy of the communists.
What?
Yeah, that's right. That's what killed him.
I know he wanted to get into Wright-Patterson to see the alien bodies, but really, the fluoride?
He was poo-pooed out of having a chance to win
because
by
of that.
the fact that he had said that fluoride was a communist conspiracy.
Oh, my God.
To dumb down the country.
Well, it's not just to dumb us down. It causes us to be third-eye blind. It's one of the many ways that they have calcified the pineal gland and disconnected
Same
us.
difference.
Same thing. I know, James, I know you know this. I'm just saying this for the edification of some people that are listening to the show, either live or on the archive. That's all. Sometimes it sounds just like we're having a conversation. I know what we're doing here is actually helping to recalibrate the consciousness of the collective here on this planet, which is no small task. And there it is. I'm being completely blunt, all right? I am totally transparent. I have no reason to hide anything at this point because time is so short, not just for this program, but for mankind. Exactly. Mankind in this world, it's a make or break moment. Talk about a clutch shot in the last few seconds of the game, folks.
We have to make a stand right now.
Well, you can't worry about seeming credible to people that have their heads in the sand.
This is right.
You can't worry about that. And too many of the people that are hosting shows online today worry about that. They try to reduce everything to alarmism.
Yes.
Or they try to reduce it to a belief that is not going to help anybody, like a belief in the Anunnaki or a belief in Nibiru. That's just like believing, well, we don't have any hope because they're hydrogen bombs. Remember the 50s? Everybody believed, well, we're all going to end up being vaporized.
Yeah, right.
Duck and cover.
Under your desk. I did those, Bill.
And the only good that that'll do is that your behind will get singed first.
Yeah, right.
Correct.
Yeah, going out like an
ostrich.
ostrich.
They had to tell us something.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, they did.
Look, more than that, they have to scare us. It's one of the control mechanisms. You know, almost the entire planet is suffering from the Stockholm Syndrome. We identify with our captors because they keep stimulating our fear reflex.
Now, that is an interesting parallel.
It's keeping us in our lower three chakras.
Which is meaning we're disconnected.
Absolutely.
They cannot afford for us to be connected and oriented properly.
So what do, Robert? Turn off the TV and quit going to the movies.
Okay, that's just the first steps, yeah. But yes, there's many things we can do, and you and I have discussed that before.
Right.
I think we need to get out and talk to our neighbors and relatives and friends and open their eyes, man to man.
Oh, I do. They want to call the men in the white coats. They always ask what for.
Well, you're unfortunate. You need to get out and get among a different crowd.
I touch a lot of people.
I was out at the base today. One of the Farmers Strategic Air Command bases used to be Carswell. Today it's the Joint Air Force Naval Station.
Uh-huh.
And these people, a couple, they had to be older than me, and I'm as old as the hills. They are right up there. They're right up there. They know everything that we're discussing. They have a handle on. And I find that every time I go out there, all I have to do is mention a couple of things, and it leads in. There's someone standing around that'll come into the conversation knowledgeably. And so I'm telling you, caller, that you need to change your environment, because it sounds to me like you're around too many people that have too much to learn and are just holding you back.
James, let me interject. Ed, I know exactly what you're saying. Ed, okay, here's the thing. If somebody's open to it, then you can engage them. If they're not open, and even if they're friends of yours or family, if they're not open or receptive, when you start trying to open them up, they're going to resist. And the more you try to open them, the more they're going to resist.
There's only one thing that's going to change that, and that is when they go 2 days without eating.
I understand, but that's pretty extreme. Ed?
That may be extreme, but that's the reality
I agree.
of the future.
I know, James. As long as people are fat, dumb, and happy, they don't want to hear the truth. Ed, go ahead.
Oh, I plant seeds. I'm like Johnny Appleseed.
Yep.
Unless someone asks me a question, they'll say, well, what do you think about this? And I'll say, what do you want to know about it? I'll tell them. I live in a college town.
Okay.
I talk to a lot of young people all the time. And,
They're the hardest to reach sometimes.
well, they're pretty open most of the time, more open than the older people.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, hey, I'll let you continue on.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure speaking with you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Enjoyed it.
We got a lot of people want to talk to you. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Okay, my question is, I'm Oriana, by the way.
Oh, hi,
Nice to hear
Oriana.
you both.
Yeah.
Hello, Oriana.
Very wonderful show. Amazing. So packed
Thanks.
with information.
Thanks.
But I didn't want you to get away, James, without saying a few words about how you know what you know. I know you maybe can't tell us everything about that, but it sure would be interesting to hear what you can say.
Oh, that's a good question.
About Napoleon, about the specifics you've talked about tonight. Just how do you know?
Well, like the EMVs, I'm task-driven, and I have methodology that is at my disposal. I have to know the truth. It's like when I did some contract work for a think tank, they had to give me the truth, whether they liked it or not, for me to do my job. Well, I'm associated with EMVs. I have to be able to determine the truth. So I have this method of being able to go back in time and to see what really happened as an observer. I can also build another reality in a rift that was created by tampering with time, and there are a number of rifts.
I know Montauk created one.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Montauk created more than one.
Oh, brother. Are they still out there? A problem?
Oh, yeah. And some of the things that fall through these rifts, like those men that came back from the Eldridge, they're not, they're from somewhere else, like some of those people that came back. The Mothmen, which I've talked about,
Wow.
fall through the rifts. They have an interdimensional existence, and
Right.
they fall through the rifts. They're not hostile. They're trying to find their young. The young are very mischievous, and they like to play in a tunnel where there is a device that is just part of their environment. They're taught not to meddle with, but they do. And they get lost in these rifts. And an elder Mothman, who is a statuesque-looking gentleman, will come through looking for them to gather them up. And sometimes he needs help.
Wow.
It sounds like this timeline is pretty tangled, right?
Well, this
Things
isn't a
like that.
timeline. This is a rift in times. It's a different thing.
Okay.
And these things exist that are extraneous to continuum, but they exist and they can be used for travel. But it's an interdimensional form of travel, and it's not what I would call pure.
Okay.
Yeah. The portals. I think that's what we were discussing earlier. They clearly play a part of our reality between various parallel universes and dimensions.
Let me tell you this. Consciousness is related to this.
Yes, clearly.
Okay.
I mean, that's how Jerry got into that portal in Peru.
Yeah.
And almost didn't make it back.
Well, if he hadn't prepared himself, he'd have just walked into nothing. And he'd come out. It wouldn't function as a portal, but he knew how to make it function as a portal.
Right, but he still got kind of lost in it all because it was just such a very disorienting experience, especially the first time. That's why he didn't want to do it the second time, because he wasn't sure that he knew what he was doing.
Well, his people know.
Yeah, I know.
I have another question. I want to know, James, it really sounds like you have the power to tip the scale on September 9th. It feels like you do. You could, had you the will, which you don't. But are you the only one? Do you feel others could possibly tip the scale one way or another for their own reasons?
We're all constrained. Yes, we have that ability, but we're constrained.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
Oh, we want to hear so much more about that. Okay.
Well, I'll say this much, that a spirit can absorb enough energy to destroy a planet. And that doesn't happen ought to teach you something about civility.
Wait a second. Be more specific. You say it can absorb enough. Oh, you mean by absorbing all the energy, it would destroy the planet?
No, the spirit can absorb enough energy to destroy a planet.
Oh, I see.
Eventually, a spirit may wander. It'll eventually get cold, and it'll go to a star for the heat. And it'll absorb energy, and it can absorb a tremendous amount of energy. And usually, most stars will have, especially if they're planets in the neighborhood, will have EMVs. It will be drawn to an EMV and go in a chamber where other spirits are, and it will share in the knowledge. And there may be spirits from other galaxies, from all over the universe. So that's a community that's unimaginable. I wish I could have that experience.
Interesting.
But the experience you will have, no matter how things go, in one scenario, you'll still be here with us.
I won't be here any longer than I'm needed to see this out, one way or the other.
Okay. Well, I'll get off now and let Robert continue. But yeah, any questions, because there's so many that could be asked with this subject. It's just such a big.
Yes, we're just touching the surface of something here. So, if possible, if James is willing, I'd certainly love to have him back. As things progress, I think it's important we continue the conversation.
I hope so.
Sure, I'm available. I am disposed to trying to enact as much clarity as I can, because it's very important for me to know that I'm doing everything I can possibly do under the constraints I'm under to see this come to the best outcome possible for everyone I'm concerned about, and that's everybody. I mean, I look upon the monsters as errant children. And it's hard to describe. Somebody asked me, well, is there a hell or no? Are people denied entry into an EMV and into those chambers? No. Could I run into Hitler in there? I said, it won't be. Yeah, his spirit, but it won't be.
Yeah.
The spirit is perfectible. The soul is perfectible.
Right.
And it's also protected. They talk about stealing people's souls or whatever. They may take some energy form when a person dies and think they've got something, but it's mercurial. There's no way they're going to hold on to it or affect its integrity.
Right.
And if they work towards that, they wouldn't last very long, because they are violating rules and principles that exceed their understanding.
Right.
Well, they've been doing that.
Yeah.
Well, you sure haven't tipped your hand of which way you think is the right way, have you? I mean, you really are amazing. Huh? It's amazing.
You know, Oriana, you know. Robert knows.
Yep.
The gentleman that called in. All of you know what's right.
Yeah.
You know what's right. I don't have to tell you what's right.
Yeah. Besides, that would be a violation of our free will. He's not here to influence us directly. He's just trying to help put things into context. As he said, clarity is very important, and it's lacking. It's lacking on this world. Desperately lacking.
Yes. You lied to about so many things. Your ancestors had a colorful history. They had unified consciousness. They were respected and regarded highly among the extended community, who tried to bring them into membership.
Yeah.
And if they had succeeded, there wouldn't have been the result that ended their system. Due to something similar to a singularity. But when these physicists that are running the Hadron Collider talk about a singularity, that should alarm you to what they mean by that. It's not a good thing. It's disastrous.
Yep.
And when they use vernaculars like the God particle and things like that, these people have lost connection, lost the humility. They have lost the obedience to higher principles. They've lost the clarity of understanding their circumstance and their position in the universe. They've lost it.
Yep. And it's a deleterious effect. It ripples throughout this timeline.
Yes, it does. It does. That's where the connection with consciousness comes in.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you both.
Oriana, I hate to see you go.
Oh, well,
She's not going anywhere. She's just listening.
Yeah, I'm listening. Don't worry. Everything you say is interesting. So, any other question anyone asks, I'll be happy to hear the answer to that as well.
Thank you for listening, Oriana.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for keeping in touch. Take care.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. James, I value everybody in this audience because I know who they are. I know they are seeds of light, and I love them dearly, even if they have forgotten. Like you said, some of them become wayward. I don't think many of those people are listening to this show, but they could. I know the folks, the little boys.
They are.
The boys and girls at the NSA. Yeah, I know it's painful for the folks at the NSA to listen to my calls, but it serves a purpose. In fact, let's take another call here real quick. You're on. Go ahead.
Hi, I have a thought concerning consciousness and the clarity of it. And one of the problems that I perceive is that it goes to something similar to the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
And that humans like to think in dualistic terms of yin and yang, right, wrong. And they can't quite set up the concept that anything could be a trinity. And with this, it creates a us and a them when you think in dualistic terms. And the new consciousness that I see that is starting to form already is that we will no longer have an us and a them, but we will have a we. And this position of all, it's an inclusiveness, it's a oneness that everyone can become part of and actually is part of the oneness of all things. And with our words, we scientists, we're talking about still. It's Neanderthal to think that solids, matter, and mass exist. All that does exist is energy. But yet, when we define and use words, we're continually using outdated words. We haven't grown up. We're still using childish words to identify a reality that we're not quite prepared for, and we're not prepared for it because our language hasn't even evolved to the point of being responsible for the idea that we are energy, and all that exists is energy, and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. So I'd like to just drop that and see if there's any consensus or opinion or whatever may be about that.
Okay, Don, thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, James.
The gentleman brought up some very interesting points, and yes, there is a limitation on the language.
Yeah.
And I try to overcome it with poetry, but it's there. And even what we've had has declined.
Yeah.
The golden age of the language was William Shakespeare's period,
mm-hmm.
and most people acknowledge that. The concern wasn't over spelling, how you spell. The concern was over the imagery that you could employ in a conversation, in the most beautiful metaphors and euphemisms of all time, and that was the age of richness of thought.
Right.
And even though you were under the political restraints of kings and queens, you could still find ways of speaking around them.
Right.
And I was talking with someone that was talking about Richard III and what a monster he was, and I said, no, he wasn't a monster. He was made out a monster to edify Queen Elizabeth I by Polydore Virgil, the royal historian, because the man that went to France, talked the French king into invading his own country, was the great uncle of Elizabeth I, the Duke of Gloucester.
I see.
So he was with the King of France on a hill watching the battle, and Richard III was leading his men, and he was a victim of one of the first arquebuses that were used in battle.
What is that?
So it's early kind of a blunderbuss-looking gun that had to be mounted on a stick. You know, it wasn't very practical, so they would load it with glass and pebbles and shot and whatever.
Yeah.
It was a modern invention at the time, of course.
Yeah, okay.
But, that's how he fell, and of course he wasn't a hunchback like Polydore Virgil portrays him. He was a Plantagenet, and all those people were 6 foot tall.
A Plantagenet? What is that?
Yeah. That was the royal family. It's kind of like the Windsors were actually Habsburgs.
Right.
Before they changed their name, that was their family.
The House of Orange.
Habsburg House.
Yeah.
The House of Habsburg.
Yeah.
And so that Richard I, of course, Richard de Lion, was Richard the Lion-Hearted, or the Lion.
Yeah.
And that connotated several different distinctions. He was a protector of Christianity, and Christ was designated as either the lion or the lamb.
Yes. The general, the head of the armies of Christ, the legions, they slaughtered so many people, James. I mean, I'm sure Jesus would not have condoned any of the behavior of the church.
No. That's all part of Jewish mythology. They stole lands, they killed a lot of people in the name of God. They claimed to have the Ark of the Holy Covenant, which was nothing more than a drum.
A drum?
Yeah, they'd load up with gunpowder and scare the adversary.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, there's a man that spent his life's work researching that, and you can get a audio DVD on it. It's about 8 hours long, and it is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
He found the lost tribe, and they're black and in Africa, and they have an Ark of the Holy Covenant, and it's a drum.
Wow. Okay. Yes, I remember.
One reason that you can't go into that church in Ethiopia
That's it, yeah.
is because they don't want you to see that.
Yeah, that's what it is, yes. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well...
Now, what was in the king's chamber in the pyramid is something else.
What was? Okay, so now you got me curious. That's a good leading statement. What was in there?
It was an advanced technology.
Okay.
And the residue of the energy field that it created is still there to some extent.
Oh, that's what I experienced. It was, okay. That makes sense.
And that was what was energizing and what they will be able to match on September 9th. If they go through with it, that's what they'll be able to match resonance with, which enables them, with their primitive form of time travel, to pinpoint the target.
Whoa. Okay, this has been fascinating, and I definitely want to continue the conversation at another time because it's, past my bedtime, I think.
Well, we don't want you to lose sleep over this.
No, I'm just teasing. It's fine. It's just fine. Thank you so much, James, for spending time with us this evening and sharing all your information. I greatly appreciate that. And please continue doing the work that you're doing. I appreciate that. I know we all do. And is there a website people can go to for you?
Sure.
Okay.
It's emvsinfo.blogspot.com.
Okay. Great.
And my colleagues will be so impressed that I remembered that this time. Usually they have to correct me.
Okay. All right. Well, fantastic. Thanks again, and take good care of yourself. And all right, James, thank you again. You take care, and we'll be in touch.
All right, Robert, I enjoyed it. Thank you for the chance, and
my pleasure.
I think there's a lot to look forward to before this all plays out.
Yes. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Good night. Okay, that was fascinating, if I must say so myself. Until next time, good night, and God bless.